This is a quick look at some of the features that Joy and I found on the property we are interested in, located off of Gregory Boulevard in KCMO. Recently, we spent over an hour walking this property, as well as a small part of the neighboring piece that is owned by the city of KCMO, in order to check out the features and get some idea of what we would be able to do for our first build and property restoration here. The following are some of the general notes we made as we were hiking the property, and a general description of some of the areas we visited on it. First, an overview of the original piece of property available. Here is the plat map from the KCMO.org website. Followed by a satellite picture from Google Earth Pro with the borders of the property marked with pins. Note that the only current entrance is not on the available property, but instead on the piece of land owned by the city of Kansas City. The recently poured gravel road does cross onto the property for several feet, but originates a good distance away where it comes off of Gregory. This picture was taken from just a few steps past the gate at the entrance from Gregory Boulevard. The road bends and curves into the distance with what appears to be a stormwater runoff creek on the left, to the north of the road, and the property to the right, or south of it. The stormwater comes out of a very large culvert emerging from under Gregory, which you will see more of later. Walking towards the property after crossing the gate was when we first noticed that there is a stormwater creek on the left we had not identified from the plat maps and satellite views we had studied before coming to the property. This end of the creek was dry while we were there due to a few weeks without rain, but there was a definite wet smell from around the culvert. Near the midpoint of the northern edge of the property, we found a small culvert recently installed and designed to let water run under the gravel road, with stones leading the runoff from up the hill down to the creek. This runoff would be what is collected in the secondary valley that runs from near the southwest corner of the property to the midpoint of the north end. We noticed several natural bluffs on the property where clearing some of the brush in front would make them an attractive visual feature, including this one near the midpoint of the property line next to the entrance road. Nearing a recently made clearing on the right side of the road, we spotted the first bit of water in the creek on the left. Several feet of the creek bed had water a few inches deep standing on stone near the sandstone blocks observed earlier. Walking a little further down the road, we found more water, as well as easier access to the creek bed. We backtracked upstream and alongside for a better view of the waterway. We found some large boulders that had broken away from the northern edge of the creek, a large downed tree, and observed signs of the high water from the flash floods a few weeks before. This was encouraging, as the debris did not get high enough to even reach the gravel road, and it seemed the water could have been 2 or 3 feet higher than it had gotten before causing any real trouble to the road. Here we viewed the clearing as we passed by, but then continued down the road to the first point where the creek crossed over it. While the water appears to be standing on the north side of the road, it was visibly flowing over the road and down into the next section of the creek to the south, if only at a trickle. There were 2 culvert pipes next to the road, possibly set to be installed under the road in the future in order to keep the water flowing under it, as well as a much smaller pipe showing in the water on the downstream side, but I never did find any sign of an exposed inlet for that pipe, and it appeared to be blocked. Continuing past the crossing to the edge of the property, we viewed the underside of the bridge and the area where the creek crosses back over the road before heading back. Again, while the water appeared stagnant upstream at the surface, you can see it visibly flowing down the rocks and across the road here. Stopping once more at the crossing, which is within property lines, we found another installed rock wall and a sewer access across the creek, as well as a gravel path leading up to Gregory that appeared to have been put in by sewer workers that lined up with the broken section of the wall next to the street. From there, we headed back to the clearing and up the hill. While hiking up, I found a large green burr acorn, indicating an oak nearby, and saw a lot of flattened grass and trails down the hill. At the time, I was thinking it was a sign of recent water flow, but have since realized it was probably wildlife tracks. We also found a very old tree had fallen across a large flat spot near the top of the hill. What would have been the upper branches of the tree had been overtaken by wild grapevine, so from a distance it looked like a smaller living tree or large shrub. There was also a decent view of the secondary valley from near the downed tree, and I made a path to get over to it for a closer look. After climbing down into the north-south valley, I found a beautiful bluff with ferns growing in random spots on it, and could see the full size of the downed tree at the top of the hill. The fallen tree's trunk formed a small natural bridge from one side of the valley to the other over the jagged rocks. Here is a more high-def picture of the bluff discovered while I was down in the secondary valley. This one was my favorite due to having both moss and other native plants growing on and directly out of the rocks. After climbing the first part of the hill and stepping into a portion of the secondary valley to the east, we headed back west and cut a path through the wall of brush at the edge of the clearing. There we found a canopied forest in which the undergrowth was sparse enough to make it easy to walk through. The area was, however, dotted with invasive Asian bush honeysuckle underneath the natural canopy made up mostly of black walnut trees. As you can see, under the canopy there is a fairly flat area that we would consider usable for a build site after having the hillside surveyed for stability. The ground is mostly clear of large trees and visible rocks, so hopefully minimal leveling and digging for foundation piers won't prove to be too much of a challenge. Looking north from the flat spot, you can just barely see the gravel road at the bottom of a steep drop-off. Turning around to face south, the size of the flat spot is easily visible, as well as the fact that it's fairly clear of shrubs and only has a few mid-sized trees. This should make it much easier to build on when the time comes. Here is another example of the beautiful fallen trees and rock bluffs on the property. This one is set several feet back from the gravel road on the south side, near the area where we would say a driveway could be cut in to get to the flat area above, making it a great feature to have next to the main entrance. Walking back out on the gravel road, we found a path we were considering for a driveway up to the clearing and other buildable areas. Using the existing trees as a guide, a short drive with possibly one switchback could be easily buildable to reach the higher portions of the property without having to remove too many, if any, established trees. Lastly, a quick trip back into the northwestern end of the creek bed and up to the huge culvert entrance shows several signs of water regularly standing or flowing in the creek. There is, however, some unfortunate graffiti just inside the tunnel walls. It would probably be easy to remove or cover this with some scrubbing or a few quick coats of weather-resistant paint. One other notable feature that I ended up accidentally cutting out of the video was the garbage found on the west end of the property near the fence lines of the houses on Myrtle. Up on the upper part of the hill there were nearly a dozen tires and wheels of various sizes, an old toilet and sink, garden hoses, fencing, and several other large pieces of garbage that appear to have been discarded over time. This is a great example of one of our goals to clean up the property and restore its beauty so our neighbors can both enjoy and respect the land around them. Overall, we were probably only able to cover 2/3 or so of the property with the time we had this trip, and missed a large portion of it to the east of the secondary valley, including the approach to Jackson Avenue and the southern property line. However, we see great potential in what we were able to observe and would love to have it as Clement Waters' first location for property ownership and management.